All right, guys, welcome into another episode of the Queen City Soccer Show. I am your host, Cole Godfrey, joined as always by my co host and partner in crime, Level Up Luke. Today, we have a very special episode for you guys. We're going to be talking about the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We're going to kind of dive into that. We're going to be covering that a little bit more exclusively on this podcast than previously. We just kind of see a if that's what we want Charlotte FC to aspire to. I think the Charlotte FC supporters should be very familiar with the continent's premier club competition. So we're going to dive into that along with just a few tidbits for Charlotte FC and Crown Legacy thrown in. Luke, how you feeling, man?
I am feeling great. We had an exciting day of Champions League action today. It had me hyped. 18 games simultaneously. It was like NFL Red Zone. I saw Scott Hansen was tweeting about it with the eyes emoji. But yeah, man, it was a crazy day. I'm ready for, soccer to start up over here on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was a great day if you were a soccer fan. I'm personally an Atalanta fan from the Serie A, and they were playing Barcelona today, and they drew 2-2, which they're still going to get through, but it would have been nice if they could have got through in the automatic playoff position, but they'd have had to beat Barcelona to do that. But yeah, I agree, man. It was a great day getting to see. It was just soccer everywhere. The biggest clubs in the world playing. Your beloved Celtic played as well today. And yeah, man, it was a tough game for them. It was a good game, but Ollie Watkins was out there balling.
Yeah, it was definitely a mismatch in terms of just talent level. You could tell that Aston Villa is just that next step up. And, our coach, Dean Smith and Jamie Smith, will be real happy with that result. Pretty brutal to see us drop 2 goals in the first 5 minutes and then end up losing by 2. Great atmosphere there in Birmingham, England. So Celtic moves on. We're going to play either Real Madrid or Bayern Munich next. So I don't think our journey is going to be lasting much longer. Still, advancing to the knockout stage is a great success for Celtic. So what do you think of this new format for Champions League?
I was actually talking about this with a guy at work the other day. I don't. We'll see. Things like today it was actually really exciting today getting to, just take it all in. I don't know if it's because I'm just so used to what we've come to know as, just the group stage and then the knockout round. I like that, but I'm willing to give it a shot, and it hasn't disappointed so far in my opinion. I think it's actually been really good. We'll see how the rest of the tournament plays out, but it's more soccer, so I mean you can't complain in my opinion.
Yeah, and for the folks at home who may not pay all the attention, it went from being basically the World Cup format where you have groups of 4 and the top 2 teams advance to now it's a conference play where each team plays, what is it, like 8 games? And then based on point seeding, the top 26 teams, I think, advance. There's the automatic qualifiers that are the top 8, and then another secondary group that plays in a knockout to get to the playoff stage of the competition. So it allows more teams to compete. It's an interesting format. Like I said, Celtic playing against Real Madrid or Bayern Munich. I mean, just brutal. And our alternate team is Manchester City. So it's going to be a lot of good matchups, but like you said, I'm willing to give it a try here. It's been exciting so far, and we've got to see a lot of matchups I think you don't normally see in the Champions League. So it's a little more equitable, maybe.
Yeah, and Atalanta, they'll be either playing Sporting from Portugal or Club Bruges. So, but they also finished ninth, so they're that top seed in the playoff bracket, if you will, and so they got a little bit of an easier time coming up than Celtic does for sure. Luke, do you want to touch on some Charlotte FC preseason matches real quick?
Man, yeah, I really do. We started out the other day with a closed door friendly against Nashville. That ended in a 0-0 scoreless draw. And I don't know if you have any info on this game. I didn't really see much posted about it, but
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. They kept this one pretty close to the chest. Other than what was posted on Twitter, just there wasn't really any highlights. The only thing that you seen coming out of this was Nashville, their social media team, kind of trying to dunk on Wilfred Zaha for getting a little fired up. So other than that, you can see there's a little animosity there. I mean, and tempers flaring a little bit. But that first game, that's really all we've seen. Now, Charlotte did play their second match today of the preseason, and that was against Sporting Kansas City. This one had a little bit more, some videos to go with it, and Charlotte did come out on top with this one, 3-2. And yeah, man, the starting 11 for today was George Marks in goal. You had Big Pat getting the start up top, Lil Abada, Williamson, Zaha, Petkovic, Westwood, Scardina, Malanda, Privet, and Thomas. Starting in the first half, because obviously in the second half they changed it all up, and just trying to get some minutes out there. But it's good to see some of these players like George Marks get out there. I like George Marks. I think he's
baby.
A serviceable backup. Yeah, I think he's a serviceable backup for sure. So yeah, I mean, and like I said, they come out. Yeah, I mean, he's another Clemson guy. That's dope. Yeah. So just real quick, guys, we're just kind of loosely touching on this because, like I said, this episode is going to be mainly about the CONCACAF Champions Cup. But the second half starting 11, you had George come out for Christian Kalina in goal, Scardina, Malanda, Tuiloma, Thomas, Williamson, Westwood, Petkovic, Abada, Zaha, Ajimong. Going into the second half, Sporting Kansas City was up 1-0. And then Patrick Ajimong gets on the end of a corner to level it up. And then just a few minutes later, Zaha with the assist to Patrick Ajimong to go up 2-1, which we'll talk about this here in a second. And then just to round it off, Brandon Cambridge, he slots a penalty home. So it's good to see Brandon out there. And dude, can we talk just a second? Again, we don't want to spend a ton of time on this. Can we just talk about Big Pat? Obviously, this is a preseason match. We know what he's coming off of with the U.S. men's national team. This guy looks like he's ready to rock and roll, man.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen him take a leap every season. He has upped his game. Coming out of college, he upped his game from D3 to D1, and then from D1 to MLS Next Pro, and then from MLS Next Pro to MLS, and kind of being forced to start and forced to play a lot because we didn't have any other strikers. And now, this season, he's poised for a breakout. He upped his game in the offseason, playing for the U.S. national team in the January camp, becoming the superstar, the head turner, and really putting himself on the radar nationally for soccer fans. And I'm seeing lots of commentators out there saying it's easily a 15-goal-plus season for Ajimon. And even talking down the new Zaha signing, saying he may not be the lead goal scorer, but he may facilitate for somebody like Ajimon and allow him to be even more successful. And, I mean, we're just seeing him flourish right now. So cheers to Big Pat. If he can stay healthy and he can keep his fitness up and play, the kind of minutes that we're going to require from a 9, I am just so optimistic, man. I'm blown away by Ajimon so far. Between the U.S. team training camp and now the highlights we're seeing coming out of Florida with Charlotte FC. How do you feel, man? Because I'm through the roof. Are you going to try to talk me down on this, or how do you feel?
Not at all, honestly. I mean, I think this is a massive, massive season for Big Pat in his career. Obviously, I tweeted this out the other day. It's a good time to pay Pat, man. It really is, because honestly, if he comes out and, if he plays well, bagging goals at a caliber which he is at the moment for Charlotte FC, I've been listening to a bunch of national media pundits and then people who do cover the United States men's national team for at a full-time level, and a lot of those people are kind of circling Big Pat to watch him and see how he performs the first part of this season for Charlotte FC, because if he does well, then there's a real chance in that March call-up with the big boys, with the Pulisics and the McKinneys and the Wayas and Mousas, that he could be there. Not saying that he's going to get any minutes. I still don't think he'll start out or he'll get minutes over Valorant or Balogun or Haji Rai or Josh Sargent, definitely, or Ricardo Pepi. These guys are playing over in Europe and doing well. Ricardo Pepi with the goal today in the Champions League. So, I don't see that happening, but just for him to get there and to be training with these guys and be in front of Mauricio Pochettino, it's a big deal. And again, I think Charlotte FC and the Big Z man, I think they're gonna have to pull the trigger and give Pat some money this season. If not, there's a real possibility he may, and there's a possibility regardless, depending on how he does, but that he may be going. And I think with Zaha back there, we will behind him. I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be interesting. I think it's gonna be a good season for Big Pat.
So I mean, we're paying him what, like $70K right now, league minimum. He's got to look at like going rates right now for a premier striker in MLS. I can't help but think like tinfoil hat time. Maybe the reason we're not seeing another big splashy signing, or the reason they're not feeling pressured to do that, is knowing that Ajman's going to be up for contract renewal, and they might be trying to save a little bit of space just in case he has a big breakout season and forces their hand to try to re-sign him. They might have to compete financially with clubs in Europe, and that puts us in kind of a different level, depending on how good his season is. If he really explodes and he goes for 20 goals this season, I don't think we'll be able to keep him. 10 to 15 range, I think that we're in that ballpark for salary. And can you imagine the glow up of Patrick Ajman going from $70K a year to, 2 to 10 million, something like that? That would be insane.
I will say this. I see something very interesting. I can't remember who wrote it. It was somebody from The Athletic talking about Big Pat. And, obviously Charlotte has, with Karol Swiderski gone, they do have an open DP slot. This is just kind of my thinking, and this is maybe a hot take. You tell me if I'm way off base here, Luke. But we have this open DP slot. Do you think it's a possibility that Zoran and the powers that be with Charlotte FC hold off on signing anyone this window to see how Patrick does this first part of this, or first half of this season? Say if we come to the summer transfer window and Big Pat has gotten, I don't know, half a season. So maybe what if Big Pat's got 10 goals? Do you think that they are waiting or could wait to go ahead and put him into that DP status and pay him big money to try to keep him here?
Yeah, I think there's a very real possibility. I mean, we have the flexibility, so that wait and see approach, as long as the team stays healthy, I think that sounds like a plan. Now, if there are injuries, if there are, situations that kind of force us to test our depth, we might look back at that and say it was a mistake. But where things stand right now, with our roster talent and knowing what's in the wings in terms of the Crown Legacy players and the backup players, we talked about Georgie Marks being a good serviceable backup. I mean, we have a pretty solid bench right now. You got somebody like Vargas, who has been a starter plenty, but he's in that kind of backup role right now, and I think our depth is pretty solid. We have some guys who can fill in at striker, who can fill in at wing, midfield. We're definitely in a pretty good spot. I think if they have that flexibility, it's pretty safe money to let it ride with Ajman for now and just kind of see how things stand in that summer window.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I mean, again, that's kind of a hot take and a bold take. I just think it could be a possibility, and it could be something I did see floated out there. So I was curious to get your thoughts on that. And I think this is a good time because I'm gonna get I want to get Danny Brams and John Hayes from the Charlotte Soccer Show. I want to get their thoughts on that. Just reminding people that we are doing our preseason kickoff show, and we're very excited to be doing this with the Charlotte Soccer Show guys. They obviously do a great job covering this team. So if if you listen to this podcast, there's a really good chance you listen to that podcast.
The Queen City Soccer Show is brought to you by SeatGeek. For all of your favorite events, whether that is Charlotte FC, concerts, comedy shows, Hornets, whatever it may be, you can find your tickets on SeatGeek. Make sure to use code QCSPOD for $20 off your first order. Whatever the event is, SeatGeek has you covered. I use it, Cole uses it, and we'd love for you to use it too. Make sure to use code QCSPOD to save $20 on your first ticket.
I do want to touch on this real quick. Crown Legacy, their schedule was released and has been released. That first game is going to be March 7th at the Mecklenburg County Sportsplex at 7 p.m. against NYCFC 2. So if you want to get out and support the boys over at Crown Legacy, they're going to be kicking off their season March 7th. So excited about that as well. We're ramping up. We've talked about this. We're ramping up. Soccer is about to be here, hot and heavy. Luke, I know you've been out there and you've seen, or have you been out there and seen Crown Legacy yet? I feel like you have.
I season ticket holder the last 2 seasons. I enjoy it, man. They're usually like Sunday afternoon games. You got to worry about the weather sometimes, but just bring a poncho, bring an umbrella if there's going to be a little bit of rain. And there's usually a pretty good tailgate out there in the parking lot ahead of time from the Mid-City Collective. The fans are solid, but it's definitely more of a family atmosphere. You know, attendance is going to be in the probably 1,000 to 3,000 range instead of 40,000 plus. It's not Bank of America Stadium. There's plenty of room to walk around. You know, if you want to have a whole row of seats to yourself and you know, you get a little bit of anxiety around crowds. Crown Legacy is a good kind of in between where there's going to be some folks around, there's going to be some vendors, but it's very chill, good vibes, and highly recommend it. They have a family play area they set up for some of the games, so check the schedule. They've done like pet adoption events there. It's like a cross between Independence, which has a lot more kind of minor league sports stuff, and like a college game. So it's a good kind of in between. Cheap tickets. It's in Matthews, which is on the southeast side of Charlotte off 485. So not the most convenient location, but you can grab a drink in downtown Matthews after the game, before the game. Carolina Beer Temple, shout out, great spot. Little ice cream shops, pizza parlors, all that kind of stuff. I like taking my kids, man. It's a good time, good Sunday afternoon, Friday evening kind of thing, and it's not really going to interfere with your schedule too much. Season tickets, I want to say, are around $100, so a little more expensive than Charlotte Independence, but you get to see the up and coming Charlotte FC players. Probably get to meet them after the game. Get autographs, whatever you want to do. It's a good vibe. I like it. And they're an MLS Next Pro. Some of the MLS Next Pro teams are going to be competing in the U.S. Open Cup this year. Crown Legacy is not one of them. And we'll tell you why coming up in a little bit here. But, Crown Legacy, man. You get to see teams from around the country. We've had some really tight games with Huntsville, which is the MLS Next Pro team from Nashville. Atlanta United 2 comes to town. You got the Florida teams, and then locally we have Carolina Core FC right up the road in Apex, North Carolina, and that is our local Carolina Derby. That's an independent MLS Next Pro team. Those are the Foxes. If you have been listening to the show for a while, we did a special episode highlighting Carolina Core. We have a video, showcasing the adventure up there on our YouTube page. Yeah, it's a good time. Another good local Carolina soccer team.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, they will be in U.S. Open Cup, by the way.
Yeah, and I mean this is a good time as ever. Again, this is going to be a CONCACAF Champions Cup episode preview. I've been following this competition for a very long time. I love this competition. You get the exposure of getting to watch Liga MX teams from Jamaica and Panama, and it's just you get to see teams you don't usually get to see, and it's this continent's premier club competition, and it's what Charlotte FC is for me. It's what the ultimate prize, other than the FIFA Club World Cup, the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and that's how you qualify for a FIFA Club World Cup is by winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So. It's definitely the aspiration to be in this tournament and this competition. This is how you qualify for, if you are an MLS team, this is how you qualify to get into CONCACAF Champions Cup. You have to be third place, second place, or the champion of the League's Cup. Or you can be the top three of that Supporter Shield standings. or the winner, obviously. MLS Cup champion goes. The U.S. Open Cup finalist goes, and the two teams in the U.S. Open Cup final will go. And then, obviously, for the Canadian teams, you're 2020. If you're a Canadian Championship champion, or the Canadian Premier League champion, which is like a level below MLS in Canada, then you also qualify. So, with that being said, for Charlotte, what they would have to do is win the league, great, supporter shield, or win MLS Cup, awesome, or finish in those top three slots of Leagues Cup, or be a finalist in the U.S. Open Cup. And that's a good segue to tell y'all that Charlotte FC is back and will be competing in the U.S. Open Cup this season, Luke. We talked about this a good bit last season about how disappointed we were that Charlotte FC was not in it. They're back in it. I'm ecstatic for this. I love this. We talk about grassroots soccer so much, and this is massive, and I'm super, super excited. Luke, how are you feeling about this news?
My motto is for the cup, right? It's the cup over everything, and that was always the U.S. Open Cup. Now we have Leagues Cup as well, which I was fine with the first year. I think it improved a little bit in the second year, and I think it continues to grow and improve. I am cautiously optimistic about the upcoming year, the format changes. But yeah, I mean, how do you feel about these cup competitions as opposed to league play?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, man, where we talked about this again last year, but the roster limitations that MLS puts on teams' rosters is a challenge, to say the least. With when you have a team like this year, I mean, Charlotte FC is going to be competing in obviously the MLS. They're going to be competing in the Open Cup and the Leagues Cup, and that's a lot of games, man. That is a lot of games on top of the regular season, and if you make it to the playoffs, that's even more games. And God forbid some of these teams, MLS, are in the Champions Cup. So think about like a LAFC who's in Leagues Cup, Open Cup, MLS, and then the Champions Cup. Man, these teams are that. If you My thing is if you're going to be in all these, I like it because I'm a fan and I like having more soccer to watch and to digest. So therefore, for me as a viewer, I love it because I love soccer. But as for these players and these teams and their safety, and you know, there has to be some sort of some and which MLS did make some transfer changes, but as far as roster changes, there has to be something, man, or there's going to be more and more injuries. But again, I personally I like the Leagues Cup, but I'm old school, man. I've been to so many Open Cup games with the Greenville Triumph, and then obviously with Charlotte FC their first year, or when I guess it was 2 years ago, whenever they played the Triumph down here in Greenville. I was there for that, and I just love the Open Cup, man. I love that the teams that I've been to, the Charleston Battery and obviously Greenville and the Independents, and these teams get to play the big boys. And I care about American soccer. I mean, I like Liga MX. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a great league, but I like the Open Cup. I would prefer it over Leagues Cup personally. With that being said, there is benefits of the Leagues Cup because you're getting to play better competition and teams out of Liga MX, Pachuca and Club America and Chivas and these really, really good teams. So, there's benefits and then there's pros and there's cons. And to me, it's pretty much 50-50, really. I don't think one really outweighs the other. In my opinion. What about you?
Kind of the same thing. I like the U.S. Open Cup because it features what I care the most about, which is the U.S. soccer teams from the grassroots level up. You have amateur teams competing in the first round. Then they start to layer in the pro teams at the lowest level. You get your USL 2 teams. You get the next round, your USL 1 teams and your MLS Next Pro teams, and then your USL Championship teams in the round after that. And they start layering in the MLS teams towards the end of the competition. So it's definitely slanted in their favor. But you get the storylines, you get the upsets, you get the the drama, the cup sets that I love, following a team out of California that's named after a burrito chain, you know, playing against an MLS team right down the street that, you know, eats those burritos every day and then has to play their soccer team. You have, you know, Charlotte FC going to, you know, I've seen games in Greenville, South Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, Birmingham, Alabama. Those are fun road trips. You get to see just new and interesting matchups. And so I got to say, U.S. Open Cup is by far my favorite.
So with all that being said, my favorite competition that an MLS team can be in is the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And again, I've mentioned this multiple times now, but it is the premier cup competition for this continent, man, for North America and Central America. So Luke, I know me and you kind of briefly discussed that you've kind of loosely followed the Champions Cup. You've never really been like, both feet in, and you said this year you're gonna be both feet in because we're gonna be covering this competition. So Luke, I mean, what as someone who hasn't followed this as closely as some, what are your thoughts on the CONCACAF Champions Cup, man? Like, how do you see this competition?
Well, I'm definitely not as informed, I would say, as you are. I've seen some matches, but I think one of the big drawbacks has been that they don't have a premier broadcast deal in the U.S. So the games are on like FS1 and 2, sometimes like Fox Sports Extra. They're just kind of hard to find. And it's been kind of out of sight, out of mind for most of my soccer watching experience. I'm not super familiar with a lot of the teams outside of MLS. Even the Liga MX clubs, I have a kind of a passing knowledge of them. So, I think part of, when you suggested this, part of my interest is I would like to learn more about it. And I'm sure, there's listeners out there who are probably in the same boat. So, I'm excited to kind of learn more about this competition and see how it goes. I mean, I'm looking at the bracket right now. It's definitely kind of top loaded with some Mexican and American teams. But I see, there's some Canadian Premier League teams in here. I gotta say, man, I would love to see some USL teams in this bracket. If you can have Cavalry and Forge, I think getting the USL Cup champion or, whatever U.S. Open Cup slot that would involve a USL team, I would love to see that.
For me, as a Charlotte FC fan, this is what I aspire. This is the trophy that is the most coveted. And yeah, so I mean, obviously I agree with you. I think that having a USL team in the CONCACAF Champions Cup would be phenomenal. I mean, I think that would. I mean, and they can do it. I mean, that's by winning or being a finalist in the U.S. Open Cup. But for this season, it starts February 4th at 8 p.m. And yes, you are right when it comes to the broadcast rights on this tournament. This is a competition to me. Of all the competitions out there, this should be on ESPN. This should be on local channels, Fox. This is the biggest one, so it should be on that. And I've literally been watching a Champions Cup like round of 16 or quarterfinal match on FS1, and then they cut to like drag racing or something. In the last 5 minutes of the match, they just don't take it seriously, and it's a travesty. But at the same time, the way that we get this better is by just a better product and the fans and the viewership actually being there. So that's a big reason as to why I wanted to do this. So our listeners at least can know where to find this and what to expect when they watch it. And so again, Tuesday, February 4th will be the very first match, and that'll be Cruz Azul from Liga MX in Mexico versus Real Hope, which is in Haiti. I will tell y'all, I'm gonna go through this and tell you who the big players are. There's only been one MLS team ever to win this competition, and that was in 2022. The Seattle Sounders won up in Seattle, and that's the only MLS team to ever win this. We've had multiple teams in the finals. Last year, 2024, the final was Columbus Crew and Pachuca. Pachuca won that, and this is not a competition like the UEFA Champions League where the final is in a neutral site. It is at whoever is. There's different qualifiers for where this game is played, whether it be goal difference or whatever it may be. I'm not 100% sure on that, but so it was played down in Mexico last year, and Pachuca won it. And yeah, so I mean, this is not an easy competition. Like I said, there's only been one winner ever from MLS. So yeah, let's go through this bracket. You got Forge FC, which is from the Canadian Premier League, playing Monterrey and that is going to be a bloodbath. Monterrey is a phenomenal Liga MX team. You have Tigres, which is again these Mexican teams: the Tigres, Monterrey, Chivas, Pumas, Cruz Azul, and Club America, and these teams are significantly heads and tails above any of these other teams that are not MLS. So we do have MLS. It's CONCACAF, so it's CONCACAF. So MLS teams, you'll see them go up and play against the Tigres and beat them, and then go play, I don't know, a Degum. I'm trying to remember who it was last year. I think it might have been Herediano, who was like from Costa Rica or something, and they beat Austin FC. And so, I mean, it gets kind of wacky. So, just keep that in mind because it is CONCACAF, so it's CONCACAF. So yeah, so you have automatic guys who are teams that are already in the round of 16, and those teams are Columbus Crew, Calvary. You have the Galaxy, and then you have Club America. The rest, everyone else is called round one, and the winner of these, it'll be two legs, home and away, and these games, the winner of those will go to the round of 16. So in your round one matches this season, you're gonna, like I said, it's gonna be Real Hope and Cruz Azul kicking it all off, Forge and Monterrey, Esteli and Tigres, and then you have Chibao and Chivas. Calvary will be playing Pumas, Monterrey and Forge, Cruz Azul, Real Hope. And then starting with the MLS, you'll have Sporting Kansas City playing Inter Miami, Colorado Rapids playing LAFC. You have the aforementioned Herediano playing against Real Salt Lake, Antigua playing Seattle, and Motagua. And a lot of these, man, I do not know how to pronounce. I am from the South. They're playing FC Cincinnati, and then Saprissa versus Vancouver. So with that being said, Luke, I mean, I don't like rooting for anybody but Charlotte FC, but in this competition, I do root for MLS teams to do well, just because it's a good representation of our league. And just again, man, this is such a prestigious tournament that the Liga MX has just owned over the years, and to see an MLS team lift that, it's a big deal. And so with that being said, Luke, is there any matchups that you're looking forward to of all those? I know you got the bracket pulled up in front of you. Is there any of those matches that you're just really, really looking forward to?
The first round here looks kind of chalky. It's a lot of MLS on MLS. It's a lot of, Mexican teams beating up on Caribbean teams. First round's kind of interesting. The matchups I'd be keeping an eye on would be Monterrey and Forge. Forge is a Canadian Premier League team. And then you also have Pumas and Cavalry. So two Mexican on Canadian matchups. That's kind of like having an MLS team play against a USL Championship team. It's weighted, the Canadian Premier League is like a Division II.
Yeah, the most competitive, in my opinion, is going to be either LAFC, Colorado, or Miami and Sporting Kansas City. Right. The other, like you said, man, the other matches, Chivas and Chibao. Chivas is going to beat the crap out of them. Tigres and Esteli. Tigres is going to destroy Cruz Azul. He's going to beat Real Hope. Monterrey is going to beat the dog wash off of Forge. Calvary is going to get boat raced by Pumas. So, and then I will say this, one that I will be looking forward to is Saprissa. versus Vancouver. This so Vancouver is they're a middle of the road Western Conference MLS team. Deportivo Saprissa is their actual name. They're an actually
Yeah.
they're the best club in Costa Rica,
Yep.
and they are actually a really good team. All everything being said, now another caveat I want to put in there, Luke, is some of these another disadvantage for MLS is the CONCACAF Champions Cup starts before the MLS season even starts. While meanwhile, Liga MX, the Costa Rican Premier Division, which is actually going on right now, they're already going to be in they're going to be playing games.
Yep.
Liga MX has already started. And it puts MLS at a disadvantage because they're coming into this thing, and they're not the only games they've played are like preseason friendlies. Meanwhile, Chivas is playing Club America, and they're already getting game minutes in. So that does put MLS at a pretty big disadvantage. So I wanted to throw that in there. But yeah, the Saprissa Vancouver, if you're going MLS in another league, but MLS on MLS, I think LAFC and the Colorado Rapids are going to be a very interesting fixture itself. We're going to be covering this thing. So after these first round matches, we're going to have another episode to look at the round of 16 and look what happened in round one. Me and Luke, we're obviously going to be trying to take in this as much as we can, and have that out there for you guys. So that way, next year when Charlotte FC does get into this tournament, speaking into existence, we know what we're looking at, and I'm again, this is something I'm very passionate about, and so I'm excited to be doing this for you guys. Luke, do you want to talk about how these teams qualified?
If you win the Caribbean Cup, which is a qualifier tournament, you get a first round bye. So there's a Jamaican team called Cavalier, which is a auto qualifier to the next round. The Central American regional qualifier is Alajuelense. They are out of Costa Rica. I think you mentioned them. Leagues Cup, Columbus Crew was the winner. So they were actually the runner-up in Champions Cup last year. So they get an automatic qualifier. First round bye. Club America out of Liga MX, and LA Galaxy was the MLS Cup champion. So two MLS teams automatically into the next round. But then you have the Canadian champion, which is like the U.S. Open Cup, but in Canada, and that was the Vancouver Whitecaps. You have two spots from the Canadian Premier League, Calvary and Forge, that I mentioned. Caribbean Cup, you have Sabao and Real Hope. And Central American Cup, five teams who I don't think we need to spend too much time discussing. I don't think they're going to get very far in here, but it does include Saprissa, who were the 2005 champions of this tournament. And
Yep.
the Leagues Cup, obviously, another North American competition. LAFC and Rapids qualified from that, so two more American teams. Liga MX gets 5 berths to automatically qualify, and we've mentioned all of those clubs already. MLS gets 4, so another 4, and then U.S. Open Cup, which is the only avenue that USL would have to qualify. Sporting Kansas City was the runner-up, and that's because the winner of the U.S. Open Cup also qualified. And that's so it goes to the next team, which is Sporting KC. It was almost a USL team, but not quite. So then they do a draw. Columbus Crew was the number 1 overall ranked team entering this competition. So they're the number 1 overall seed. Club America number 2, LA Galaxy number 3. So I mean, the U.S. teams are put in as good of a position as they could be in this tournament. That being said, you have teams that are just coming out of training camp versus teams that are in mid-season form. So this competition is slanted heavily against the U.S. teams just because of the calendar. And I don't know a great way to address that. They probably haven't already debated heavily. But, U.S. has only won this tournament one time, I believe in, what was that, 2023?
2022, yeah.
2022. Yeah. So, it is what it is. But yeah, the bracket looks interesting. I think it's going to be, I mean, you're going to have the Rapids and LAFC in the first round, and the winner plays Columbus Crew. So the MLS teams are going to whittle themselves down pretty quickly. Real Salt Lake and Herediano, the winner plays LA Galaxy. So there's not very many paths for U.S. teams to advance where they're not just knocking each other out of this competition. Tinfoil hat time, maybe there's a reason for that. CONCACAF seems to have a bias against us because we are the U.S. and they hate us because they ain't us. But yeah, I mean, it looks like an interesting competition. I want to see what the storylines end up being. Where are the upsets? Where's the club that overperforms and knocks off one of the big dogs? And I was watching some of the games last year. That seems to be where the fun is, because the way that this bracket plays out is a home and home. So you'll have the Mexican team play at a Liga MX stadium that holds, 70,000, 90,000. And then they play their second leg in the Caribbean on a, multi-purpose field with a track running around the outside and people throwing bags of various liquids onto the field. I mean, it's the full CONCACAF experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's my favorite thing about it, man, is, and again, I mean, like last year, Austin FC, they were touted to be a good side in this competition, and their first match went down to Costa Rica and thoroughly got beat. And I mean, and then got put out in that round when they played their home leg. I mean, they couldn't overcome the deficit and got put out. So I mean, it does happen. And I think, just touching on what you talked about a second ago, as far as what MLS could do to not have these teams be at such a disadvantage. I mean, it's been talked about, MLS going to the European calendar, if you will, as far as soccer goes. So the August to Mayish calendar, and if that's the case, and if MLS were to do that, you would see more MLS winners in this competition, in my opinion. And not only that, but there's all kinds of problems with that. Obviously, you have the Leagues Cup is in July. So, what do you do with that competition? Does Liga MX also join that type of calendar, and you played at a different time? There's a lot of what ifs. But as for right now, the Mexican teams, they're favorites. I mean, and a lot of them, and that's the big competition, right? Like domestically or in national men's teams, I think the U.S. has surpassed the Mexican national team. I mean, we can look at every metric you want to. The U.S. owns Mexico right now in everything when it comes to the national teams. I think the U.S. men's national team youth academy is better. I think everything to do with the men's national teams favors the U.S. right now. But for that overall dominance, I still think Liga MX still has the better quality teams over MLS. And not saying the MLS can't compete and beat them, because we see it year in and year out in Leagues Cup. We see it year in and year out in this competition. The MLS teams do hold their own and do beat the top of the top Liga MX teams and put out the Club Americas and the Pachucas and the and the Monterreys. And I personally think that for MLS to take that next step, they have to be consistently winning this competition. And, that's something that, as a Charlotte FC podcast, as Charlotte FC fans, that's where I want to see this club, is in this competition, fighting for, the top of the top and playing the best of the best in this region. Because, again, like I said, the winner of this competition does get to play in the FIFA Club World Cup. So that's, that is a big deal when you're playing against the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas, the Bayern Munichs, the Manchester Cities of the world, So that I'm excited, Luke. Again, this kicks off February 4th, and if you're not following us, follow us on Twitter at QCS Pod, Instagram at QCS Pod _ TikTok and YouTube QCS Pod. We are, this will be covered. This competition will be covered. So when it starts, follow us on Twitter. Make sure you're following. Make sure you're subscribing, hitting that subscribe button to the podcast and on YouTube, because we're gonna have it covered for you guys. That way, when Charlotte's in it next year, man, y'all are familiar and y'all know what's going on and y'all know where to come to for the coverage for it.
Well, like you said, it'd be good to see Charlotte FC in this competition, but I do want to put an asterisk on that because the way MLS is sending teams to competitions this season, they are not sending all teams to all competitions. So we're in 2 out of the 3 cups, the Leagues Cup and the U.S. Open Cup. If we were going to be in this competition, we would probably only be in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and then our MLS Next Pro team would be in the U.S. Open Cup. So,
yeah,
selfishly, I like seeing us in Leagues Cup and U.S. Open Cup, specifically the U.S. Open Cup. And I like to have those matchups. It's more games that I can go to here at home and more road games that I can go to. And support the team and have those interesting travel experiences. Could I go to Mexico? Yeah. Do I want to go to Guadalajara or Monterrey? Probably not. Do I want to go to the Caribbean? Absolutely. I love it there. I've been to a lot of the Caribbean already. It's wonderful. The people are amazing. Do I want to go to a stadium in the Dominican Republic where I'm going to get bags of piss thrown at me? Probably not. Like, it's no offense intended, but it's CONCACAF. Like, that's the experience. So I like the U.S. Open Cup and the Leagues Cup. It's a money grab, but it gives us more home games. So yes, I'm interested in this competition. I want to see us excel, but if we're not going to be in this competition, I'm really glad that our front office was able to get us in both of the others, where we get more home games, we get more regional road games. So, I mean, that's pretty much where I'm at, but I'm going to be excited to follow the Champions Cup this year and see, what storylines develop, what cup sets we see. And, it's always wild to watch these games going on at the most random locations with teams who would never play each other, and just see what happens, man. It's the beauty of soccer, the beautiful game.
Yeah, and I will say this, man. I mean, just think about it, though. Think about Charlotte FC being in the Champions Cup and playing a Club America or, a Chivas at Bank of America Stadium in the quarterfinals or semifinals of the Champions Cup. How rowdy Bank of America Stadium would be, man. That place would be absolutely rocking.
I mean, we see it in the Leagues Cup, man. They got like triple security. Everything's locked down. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to play those big teams all the time. But once we win MLS Cup, then I think we'll earn it.
Yeah. So with that being said, we'll put a bow on it. Again, keep an eye out because we are going to be covering this.
Yeah, make sure to like and subscribe, as the kids say. W in the chat. I'll have some interviews coming up soon here. Cole's going to join me for some media series interviews. Get to meet some of the folks who bring you the news from in and around the pitch. We host a podcast, we talk ball, but I always love talking to the actual reporters who are doing the work. So excited to bring you that. We'll have some more returning guests that you guys have met in the past. Willie P from WFNZ is getting a new co-host in the booth this year. We're excited to see who that's going to be. We're trying to get them scheduled whenever that news might drop. We got Tom Bogert from SoccerWise, who I just saw a merch drop. He had a great tweet that was, "It's Wilfred Zaha, dude." And friend of the pod, Willie P, turned that into a t-shirt, just that tweet printed out on a t-shirt. So I got to get myself a copy of that. The crossover that we all needed. Tommy Scoops, who was a closet Charlotte FC lover, Sir Minty lover, and I
don't think it's much of a closet, man. He's pretty open about it.
So we'll definitely try to get him back on the show. But yeah, it's an exciting year. I was just kind of going through my camera reel from the past year and just seeing all these highlights that we got a chance to cover, man. Starting last year, we had a lot of great interviews. We covered the soccer tournament, Charlotte FC, all the ups and downs. We had interviews with some really cool people in the not just the Charlotte community, but we had an interview with the new head coach of Carolina Core last year. We had an amateur team out of Pennsylvania where I interviewed the coach, a German amateur team in Pennsylvania, and they played the Charlotte Independence in the U.S. Open Cup last year, and I interviewed their coach. I mean, lots of cool highlights and opportunities and adventures that we got to have in 2024. So I'm excited. I'm thrilled to bring you guys more in 2025. Branch out. You tell us, like, what kind of coverage do you want to hear? What's important to you? We got the Champions Cup coverage here. This is just it's great that we get to do this as a hobby, and hearing from the listeners and getting your questions and asking them in press conferences to Dean Smith directly. It's a treat and a pleasure. So just thank you guys for listening, and thank you, Cole, for being such a good host here.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It is an absolute privilege. This is coming up on my 4th year of this podcast, and when I started this thing, it was just, it was something that I was excited about the club, and I was like, you know what, man, I had worked on a couple other podcasts, in college football world, and I was like, you know what, I would like to do this and see how it goes, and it turned out that I thoroughly enjoyed it, getting to meet the people in the community, and then not just in the Charlotte FC community, but the MLS community, having different entities from different teams on to preview games and talk shop, and getting to pick brains and stuff like that. Then obviously adding Luke last season to the team was massive and has been phenomenal for this show and this. So, big ups to Luke and all that he does. He puts a ton of work in behind the scene. He does all the editing for this show. He does all the producing for this show. So, he takes it on the chin and keeps it trucking. Obviously, hosts the spaces. So he does he does a lot for this show, and that's a big reason to the growth and the things that we can do because of him. So, big ups to you as well, Luke.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's going to be a great season. Can't wait to get back in the post-game Twitter spaces and talk with the regulars on there and meet the new folks who join in. Every game it's different. We had, we have actual journalists jump on sometimes. We have, one game last year was a playoff game. We had somebody join who was a Miami fan in Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the Atlanta game. And he hopped into our spaces to tell us all about it. Like, we just get some really random stuff in those post-game spaces. So make sure you guys check that out. I'm at LVLUP_Luke on Twitter. That's where the spaces are hosted. That is Cole_Godfrey. Make sure to give him a follow. And you can find us at QCS Pod on most platforms and at QCS Pod _ on Instagram. So give us a like, give us a follow, and we will see you guys next time. We should have a new episode in your feed, probably 2 episodes in the next week here.
Yep.
That's it for me, man. As always, it is for the crown.
For the crown.